This is Andy Purewal for Boxing Social in association with Betfred. I'm joined by John Ryder over Zoom. John, firstly, how are you?
I'm good, mate. I'm good. How are you?
I'm all good. Obviously, one of the reasons behind us doing this interview on a Saturday night is because earlier in the day we saw a certain Triple G become a unified world champion at middleweight. Just want to start off with that before we do come on, link it to yourself rather, John. What did you make of seeing Gennady overcome Murata?
Well, mate, I'm glad you was calling to discuss this and not Arsenal getting stuffed by Brighton. Um, no, listen, I think it's a fight we've been waiting for. Obviously, it got postponed from, I think, was it the 29th of December? So fair play. They've kept it in the mix and it's finally happened. But listen, it was a slow burner to start off with. I don't think I think Golovkin struggled to find his distance at the start. I mean, obviously Murata's a bigger fella. I think the second half of the fight, I think Golovkin turned it on, and he wasn't the vintage Golovkin, but he showed signs that he's still got a lot to give.
How much from what you saw, John, do you feel that Gennady has deteriorated from the version we saw against Canelo in that first fight, for example?
It's a tough one. Do you know what I mean? He's been active for I read over 400 days now. And I mean, at his age, he turned 40 yesterday. It's not ideal. I mean, Father Time. I don't think anyone's beat Father Time, have they? So listen, he's doing spectacular for his age and doing what he's doing at 40. I mean, let's not take anything away from Murata. He's a great fighter, a great champion, and he's had a good career himself. And I'm sure he'll go on and continue his career. But I think Golovkin come out in the second half of the fight and showed what he still had, still got power in both hands. And I mean, when he come out for that ninth round, he come out like a steam train. And didn't look like much was going to stop him, but I think he misjudged it slightly. I think he thought Murata was a bit more gone than he was, but Murata caught him with a few good shots, and the end finally came. But it was a good fight.
John, as you said earlier, Gennady was slow to get going, and particularly those first 3 or 4 rounds, they were very competitive. I think I was watching, I had Murata winning after those early rounds. Was you surprised to see maybe Gennady slow to get going? Or would you put that down to ring rust, or what would you put that down to?
I mean, it's tough. He's fighting in a foreign country. He's obviously originally from Kazakhstan, but he's resided in the States for God knows how long now. So, I mean, I suppose his body clock's everywhere, especially at the age of 40 as well. I suppose it's a bit more harder to adjust to the time zones and whatnot. But yeah, I think listen, he's an old hand at this now. He's been boxing for so long now that he doesn't need to go in and rush the first couple of rounds. He can take his time and have a look, and he's an experienced fighter now. And I think that showed that he's not got to rush. He's not got to force anything. And I think he's gone to Champions backyard there, and he's done a good job. So it could just be a number of things. It could be the ring rust. It could be the age, or it could just be the jet lag of the journey to Japan.
John, you yourself have been after a big name in your career for the last couple of years. Since the Callum Smith fight, you've been desperate to face another kind of leading contender in the division. And no disrespect, obviously, Danny Jacobs, who you most recently fought, but you've wanted a Canelo, or in this case, a Golovkin, which I'll come on to. Is that a fight now you'd consider, especially on the back of watching Gennady today? And do you take even more confidence from his performance and believe that you would overcome him if a deal could be made?
It's one of those things. I mean, I back myself against anyone. When I feel like I'm at my best, I feel like I could beat anyone. I mean, some people would say I'm ridiculous, I'm delusional, but that's just how I feel. I mean, so my last fight was against Danny Jacobs, a good name in boxing. Good close fight, but I dealt with that, and I just want to kick on my career now. Whether that be with like a Golovkin or a Canelo, obviously I'm targeting Canelo because he's the champion. He's got all the belts at 168. But if someone like Golovkin wanted to come up to his weight and wanted to fight in the meantime while he's waiting for a shot, then I would be more than happy to oblige. But I think we're going to see that third fight in September. With all hopes that Canelo comes through the Bivol fight in May. So I'm sure we'll see the trilogy fight and then go from there. But listen, if anything, if there's any hiccups in the road, I'm more than happy to step in and fight either one.
Eddie's been very vocal about the potential of a third fight agreement in this 2-fight deal, which he currently has with Canelo. Obviously, first one being Bivol, as you mentioned there, what everybody expects to be the Golovkin trilogy in September, and then potentially one more in December. Ideally, he said he'd like him to fight over here in the UK. You was one of the names mentioned. We've seen Joshua Buatsi-Richards winner mentioned as well. But for yourself, though, John, if say Canelo wasn't to go down that route and wanted to face somebody else, would you be happy to face Golovkin in a hypothetical scenario where, say, if Canelo was to overcome Golovkin in the trilogy bout, would you still be happy to face the loser, in that case being Golovkin?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we're in this game to obviously earn a living and secure our futures, but so we're also in this game to fight the best names out there, and Golovkin is one of those. So whether it be a Canelo or Golovkin, I've just boxed Andi Jacobs, so it's all about good names on the record and fighting the best. So I'm doing that, and I want to continue to do that.
John, for yourself, if a fight with, say, Gennady was to come to fruition, how would you go about and approach that fight?
It's a tough one. I mean, you're gonna have to get cruiserweights in for punch power, I suppose, and welterweights in for size. But so that's a tough one. Maybe I'll just use Conor Benn for sparring because he can punch like a cruiserweight. And but yeah, it's just tough. I mean, obviously, I think you see signs that Golovkin is aging, but still got a lot to give in the sport. So I mean, don't old man him off yet and think that he's a shot fighter, because he's far from it. And his chin still looked intact. His legs didn't give it at all. And listen, the punch power's still there. So you've got to prepare for a TikTok Golovkin.
How much, John, now going back to kind of your last fight with Andi Jacobs, how much have you looked back on that, and what do you take away from your win and your performance in that fight?
A massive learning fight. You can learn a lot from these fighters, and I mean, take away the negative and take away the positive. But in that fight, I did learn a hell of a lot about even little things like fighting up close with these fighters. They know how to hold, they know how to fiddle, they know how to save, conserve energy, and not get hit full on. So I learned a lot from that fight, and I think it will stand me in good stead moving forward with my own career.
John, people very much saw that fight as a fight of two halves. Danny having a better of a first, you having a better of a second. Did it go how you anticipated it would?
Yeah, it went exactly as me and Tony planned. I mean, Tony obviously sets out a game plan, and I'd try and deliver it. And he said it'd be hard for the first half of the fight, and he wasn't wrong. Just to throw caution to the wind and see what Andi Jacobs had left, and we did that. But I think if you look at the second half of the fight, when I stepped on the gas, I won the rounds, and I won the rounds big. I mean, I think 7, 8, and 9 were clear shutout rounds where, listen, a lot of the earlier rounds he did win, but a lot of them were close and very subjective. So I think I won the last 5 of the 6 rounds clear, and I think I had a share of the first couple of a few of the first 6 as well. So I feel that I fully deserved the nod and to get the victory that night.
John, we've spoken about potential fights for yourself in there in Canelo and Golovkin, but I imagine you're going to want to stay busy until maybe an opportunity does present itself against one of those names, if it can. Is there anything that you've discussed so far with Eddie in terms of your next outing?
We were saying we're hoping for something to get out in the summertime. About staying active. I mean, obviously with COVID and whatnot, we've had a lot of inactivity the last 2 years. So it's important to stay on the ball, stay in the gym, stay fresh. So I'm hoping June, July time we can get out again and get another good fight, and then we'll just see where we go from there.
John, just before I let you go, just going to touch on 2 other people who you train alongside. Young Conor Benn obviously returns next Saturday night. Just want to get your thoughts on kind of how his camp has gone from what you've seen and what you're expecting to see from him in this Chris Van Heerden fight.
Listen, Connor's, as you know, he's always crushing in the gym, crushing numbers, breaking records. But I think you're going to see I say it about tonight, he's just an explosive fighter, and he's one of them fighters where don't blink, because it could be over in the first second of the round, or it could be over in the last second of the last round. So it'd be a good fight, but I think you're going to you can only see Conor Benn being victorious in that night.
John, in Conor's case, in this fight, like has been for his most recent fights, he's a heavy favourite, and because of how explosive he's looked, because of how well he's delivered his performances, there's kind of always this expectation or pressure on him to, against somebody like a Chris Van Heerden who hasn't been active despite his past achievements. He will be going in as a big underdog, but there's this pressure and expectation on Conor to kind of always produce this explosive performance. Do you feel like if he does so against the Chris Van Heerden, he will get the credit he deserves? And also, does Conor stay motivated with somebody like a Van Heerden when, I've spoken to him and he said openly he would have been open to facing a Mikey Garcia or a Danny Garcia in this fight?
Listen, I mean, as fighters would fight anyone. That's why we have management teams to pull us back and build their careers properly. I mean, he could have had half a dozen other fights against champions by now, but it's about moving along nicely. He's relatively inexperienced in boxing and very little amateur career, so he's still learning the job. And I mean, the learning that he got from the Chris Algieri fight and the learning that he'll get from the Van Heerden fight is invaluable, and you can't buy that. So he'll look good against Van Heerden, I'm sure. Whether he knocks him out in the first or the middle or the last, I don't know, but he'll look good in doing so. And then these fights are going to be there for him, the Danny Garcias, the Mike Garcias. So there's always big fights there for him.
And then, John, just one final one. Obviously, Craig Spider-Richards is getting ready to face Joshua Buatsi on May 21st. Just getting your thoughts on that. I know you've shared the ring in sparring during your last fight with Danny Jacobs in the build-up to that and before that as well. Just kind of your thoughts on Craig's bout with Josh.
It's a good fight. Two lovely fellas. I mean, I've shared the ring with Joshua Buatsi a lot as well, and a lot of sparring. So both quality fighters. A real good fight for both. I know Joshua Buatsi had a lot of good fights in his career, but I feel like this is a legitimate 50-50. There's a bit of needle from the amateur days as well when Buatsi beat Craig in, I think it was the ABAs. So it's a great fight for British boxing and even more so for South London. I'm sure he's going to be out in force on the 21st.
Yep.
And full of noise for the fight. But listen, it's down to who's the best to the right, and Craig's training hard. I know what Craig's doing. Obviously, Josh is out in the States with his team and training hard. So I think we're going to be in for a treat, and this is a great fight for the British public.
Do you see it as a 50-50 fight?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, because I think listen, on Craig's recent form, he's stepped up from super middleweight. He's looked great in doing so. I think he's stopped most people bar Bivol. Good fight with Bivol. Probably started a bit too late in that fight and let the early round slip away from him. But who knows? Bivol's one of them fighters that only does enough what he has to do. So you never know. Like it's subjective. But Craig put on a good performance and took a lot of credit for that fight.
Right, John, we'll leave it there now. I'll leave you to get on with your evening, and obviously I see the Spurs games on at the minute, so I'm sure you're hoping Aston Villa can turn it around, because Spurs are winning 1-0, so the race for Champions League for you guys in Arsenal is very much hot.
Yeah, I think they might overtake us, yeah.
But yeah, so I appreciate you doing this interview. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday evening, and thanks for speaking to me on Boxing Social.
Brilliant. Thank you, Andy.